This week's episode of Life Planning 101 originally aired in 2015. Please enjoy. Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services in Eastland, Texas. Tune in every week as we share important information to help you and your family live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, legacy and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Good morning. We got a great show lined up today. We're actually going to do more of a generic type of show. I figured it'd be a great intro because a lot of times, people don't know the realm of things that we'll be talking about. And I figured as our first show, this will kind of give you an idea of what spectrum that's going to cover. And in order to do that, I picked out one of my favorite articles that we used for the outline of the show. It was called The 5 Most Common Mistakes in Retirement Planning.
Okay.
And I think this is really good because one of the things, I heard John Wooden one time put it was, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts, right?
Yes.
Yep. So, and I think that's really important because sometimes we think we know it all. And we feel very confident in ourselves, and then, we get a slap in the face.
Sometimes?
Yeah,
How about most times?
That's right. In fact, I had a lady that I was working with one time, and we were going through some pretty difficult planning. It was very hard. She had a lot of problems with her family members, and we were talking about her legacy and how to make things happen. And it was difficult for her because she didn't want to see the things that she had built her whole life just go to the wayside. And then she also had another child that had some problems with some drug abuse and how to handle that situation because she didn't want to aid and abet. And she said, I think probably the hardest part of your business is protecting people from themselves, isn't it? And I said, you're absolutely right, because that's the one thing we can't battle against. We can't even put up an armed force against, because we can only help people that want to be helped. And, I think the reason that's so important for us to bring that up and at the forefront of this show is because if you're unwilling to, get help, if you're unwilling to change, what's the point? What's the point of being able to listen and try to better yourselves? Because we all can, and it doesn't matter what aspect of life. I think my husband said it 1,000 times when he came to work with us. He'd see us go to, we go to probably, 20, 25 different conferences a year learning things. And he says, I'm just amazed at how humble you guys stay. After 40 plus years of having all this experience with clients. And the one thing is we've got to stay humble. And I would encourage everybody to stay humble in what they're doing and whether it's their career or whether it's their retirement or whatever it is, because it's extremely important. So with that, one of the things that I think is really important before we get into the meat of this meeting today is, talking about something John Maxwell talks about often in his books, and that is begin with the end in mind. In fact, that's going to be your save your bacon tip of the day, okay? So begin with the end in mind.
I like that. Yeah. Save your bacon tip of the day.
Save your bacon tip of the day.
I'm assuming we're going to have many of those.
Compliance wouldn't let me use any dollar figure for a tip of the day, so we had to go with save your bacon tip of the day.
That's more catchy anyway.
Yeah. So begin with the end in mind. And the reason I say this is I want you to think about if you just take off on vacation today and you don't have a plan for vacation. You just start driving. Okay, where are you going to end up?
Who knows?
Who knows? Did you make sure your tires were full?
No.
Yeah. Did you fill up your gas tank? Did you get your oil changed? All of those things are important because what happens if you get a flat and you're in the middle of West Texas?
You're going to be really hot, and the buzzards will be circling.
That's right. That's exactly right. So, it's just like a vacation. And I heard this once, that we spend more time planning our vacations than we do our retirement. And I think that's very true.
That's probably true, yeah.
Yeah, because we get excited about it, of course, which makes it easy. But the ultimate thing is that we begin with that end in mind. What we envision our vacation, right? We think about all the things that it's going to bring to us. Oh, we're going to go here, we're going to enjoy this, and we actually maybe feel or see or smell or get the sight of what is going to be in front of us at that vacation. And, we don't do that with our retirement. We don't do that with our life planning. So, one thing I want you to work on this week, if you don't do anything else, is set some time aside just to start thinking about the end of your life. and thinking about if you're sitting there and maybe it's underneath your favorite tree, or maybe it's on your porch swing, or maybe it's on a beach, or maybe it's in the mountains, wherever it is, and you're looking back over those last 30 years, what has to happen for you to feel successful about those 30 years?
Very good. Save your bacon tip of the day.
That's right.
I love that.
That's right.
That's our first segment. Can you imagine? Already, that's how fast it goes.
Yep, that's exactly
But
right.
we're already getting fantastic information. You're listening to Life Planning 101 right here on Good Morning Texas. Our guru, what should I call you? Planning guru. Planning guru Angela Robinson from Kennedy Financial, talking about today 5 most common mistakes in retirement planning. We do need to take a quick break, but we're going to come right back with more Life Planning 101. Keep it right here. 8:40, my friends, 8:40. You're listening to Good Morning Texas and our special presentation each and every Monday morning at 8:30. Life Planning 101 with Angela Robinson from Kennedy Financial. Good morning again, ma'am.
Good morning.
As mentioned, today's topic, 5 most common mistakes in retirement planning. What's number 5 or number 1, whichever one you would like to start on?
Well, I guess if, I really have an interlude to all this. There is one thing that I think that is more important than any 5 of these mistakes you can have. And that's kind of where we left off the show is, and you can guess it, the number 1 threat you have to your retirement planning is yourself.
Not planning.
That's right. That's right. For whatever reason, whether it be because you're procrastinating, because you feel like you got it all, whether you think, oh, it'll be fine, whatever it is, that's usually the biggest threat to your retirement. So with that goes our number 1 planning mistake. That is making assumptions from the beginning.
Okay.
Because, typically when we do something, we say, oh, I plan to retire in about 3 to 5 years. Period. That's the extent of it.
That's
it. If you think about it. Well,
Sounds like me.
Yeah, he's got his pension. We've got our Social Security. We're going to be fine, right? Well, is that going to be enough money? You going to run out? Will you have enough income in 15 years into retirement? And by the way, a lot of people think that when they retire at 65, they just need 15, 20 years of income.
Not these days.
No.
My grandmother is 100 years old.
Yeah, well, there you go. I am so glad that you're a partner with me on the show because, that is so powerful because people say, oh, I'm not going to live that long. There's just no way. My dad has always said, and I love this, today is the first day of the rest of your life. How long is that going to be, realistically? I look at, so many family members that we've had that have lived into their 90s. Mm-hmm. We had a client that passed away last year. She was 98 years old, still driving herself to our office.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That's awesome.
And that's a quality of life. It's not just living. You have a quality of life. So she was still spending money, still needing to, take care of herself. And her husband had passed away 15 years prior. But, had she not planned properly, she wouldn't be in the position that she is.
Let me ask you one thing quickly on this. 98 years old, 100 years old, these are, and it's going to get longer with technology and so forth. It's not only for your quality of life, but you may have 20 grandchildren and 10, 30 great-grandchildren. Is that a factor as well?
Oh, absolutely. I heard one of the saddest stories I think I've had to hear in a long time. It was coming from another gentleman in our business, and he was talking about his own family. His granddad, he would always give those grandkids, a check every year for their birthday. It was a $100 check, and to him that was a lot of money. And he retired in 1982.
Wow.
Well, he finally got to a point that he could no longer give those checks to his grandkids. Mm-hmm. And it devastated him to do that. And we don't think about that, being, it's not that big a deal. These are all successful grandchildren by now. They're doctors and lawyers and this and that. But that's not what it was about. It was about the fact that meant something to him to be able to do that every year. And the day that he had to stop, it was very, very impactful. It was very emotional for him. So you're absolutely right.
If you don't do it for yourself, do it for your grandkids.
That's right. Or your spouse.
Yeah.
A lot of times people come into our office and they say all the time, and we ask them, okay, so what is your number 1 priority? Well, I want my husband or I want my wife to be taken care of after I'm gone. Well, how do you know that's going to happen? So this leads us into the number 2 most common mistake of retirement, okay? And we're going to talk about that here in a moment when we come back from this short break. But before we go, I do want to encourage those questions. Life planning at Kennedy-financial.com. So don't miss it.
Fantastic. Angela Robinson is our very, very special guest. I'm Stace Gaddy. You're listening to Good Morning Texas, our special segment, Life Planning 101 from Kennedy Financial Services. Take a quick break, check in with our sponsors. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. Your fingers will fall off. 8:49 is your time. You're listening to Good Morning Texas, our special programming on Monday mornings. Life Planning 101 with Angela Robinson. If you've just joined us, good morning again, Mrs. Robinson.
Thank you. And, we're talking about the 5 most common mistakes in retirement planning. And I really want to encourage you again. We talked about this at the beginning of the show that John Wooden, Coach John Wooden, he says, it's what we learn after we know it all that counts, right? So be humble. That's what I want to encourage you to do, because today's just about a fact find, a real, true, honest opinion of yourself. We have a notation in our office. We always say progress starts by telling the truth, and we have to tell the truth to ourselves before we tell it to anybody else. So we've talked about making assumptions from the beginning of retirement about retirement, and now I want to talk about failing to protect your retirement. And what I want you to think about is if you look at your house. And think about a mortgage. When you go to get a mortgage, they require you to get insurance on your house. Now, after you've paid off that mortgage, do you continue to keep the insurance on your house or do you not?
I don't know. That's why I've come to you.
I would hope you keep your insurance on your house because, for most of us, that's a huge piece of our financial picture. And if something were to happen to our home, what would happen to that financial picture? So, and we do. Most of us insure our home. We insure our vehicles. So why would we risk our retirement? The thing that we may spend 20, 30, 40 years in, why would we risk that? And the thing is, most people do. There are so many risks in retirement that can be absolutely devastating. We talked about one of them, living too long. What about dying too soon? We actually had a good friend of ours who was a client, and he worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And the day we told him he could retire, the next time we went to see him, he was a doctor, and we didn't even recognize him. He was out in his lobby in his Hawaiian shirt and his flip-flops. He was so excited. Mm-hmm. The sad thing was, a week later, he had a stroke. And he never was the same again. So you just don't know how that's going to be and what's going to happen to your surviving spouse when that's over. Or what about becoming incapacitated over a short period of time or a long period of time? Losing the ability to take care of yourself. What about being sued? What about that little thing we call inflation, a thief of our money? Has anybody noticed that it costs more to go to the grocery store today than it did 5 years ago? Absolutely. I can't believe what I pay for a gallon of milk. It drives me insane.
It is unbelievable. Yeah.
It is. Investment risks, taxes, interest rate risks. One of the things I think is so interesting is we call this going broke safely. Okay. Putting your money in a bank, putting your money in savings accounts or CDs. Okay. And we just talked about inflation, right? So we think the cost of living goes up by about 4% each year. The government tells us it's about 1.5% or less. That's really not true. Again, go to the grocery store, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay? So if it goes up by 4% each year, that means if you have $100 in the bank, next year that $100 is only worth $96.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not a lot. So when we think about CDs being a safety tool, and what are CDs paying us today? What are interest rates? They're nothing, right?
No, what are they?
Nothing. So at best, you may be able to get a 3 or 5 year CD that pays 1%. So that means,
really?
Yeah. So that means you're losing, 3% on your money every year. That's pretty painstaking. Okay. Another thing that's a risk in retirement is paying too much in taxes. Okay. I want to give you a scenario. Let's imagine you have $1 and that dollar doubles. So now you have 2. And we're going to double it again and again and again until we've doubled it 30 times. If you doubled that dollar 30 times, you'd have $1 million. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's put Uncle Sam in the picture.
Oh, no.
Okay. Let's say every time we double it, we have to pay him 25% of that doubling, okay? The difference between that $1 million and then Uncle Sam, if you had Uncle Sam in the picture, you'd have $72,000.
Really?
Yes. So,
Man.
yeah, so taxes can be a horrible strain on your money, okay? And then the fourth risk that I think is really important for us to consider is something we call emotional investing, okay? Would you say you're emotionally tied to your money?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm really not.
You're one of a kind because
Yeah.
most people work really hard for it. So they think, okay, I don't want to lose
I
it.
should be more. I really should. And what you're saying is motivating me because I do definitely fall into the area like your other brother that's like, the Lord said he'll provide. And I probably do need to plan more. I really do. That's why I'm sitting here listening going, okay, that applies to me. That applies to me.
That's good. That's
but
good.
yes, I would guess that most people, in fact, we know that most people, they're chasing money in a lot of ways.
That's right. We have two things that get a hold of us, and it's called fear or greed. Warren Buffett, if you're familiar with Warren Buffett,
Certainly.
He's supposedly the greatest investor of all time, right? He tells us to buy fear and to sell greed, okay? We do the opposite of what those emotions are. And it's so true. We call that discipline. And let me tell you, after 40 years of experiences, those experiences have taught us to be comfortable with discipline.
Yeah.
Because discipline is the one thing that won't allow you to do something crazy. And we're all tendent to do something crazy, especially when we're grieving, especially when we have an emotional battle going on. It is so important to have that discipline in place, and sometimes that discipline just means having someone there to sit there and get on their knees and beg you not to do something when they know you're about to do something wrong. So that's really important. And then the number 5 most common mistake in retirement planning, which I do believe is probably the most important, is what we call piecemealing a plan together.
Okay.
A lot of people assume that they can take advice from here, and still do it on their own, right? Okay. And
wow.
Yeah.
Even I know that. I mean, you can't get 5 people in a room to agree on anything.
That's right.
So
yeah, you can ask your brokest neighbor about money, and they're going to have an opinion.
That's right.
Okay. So, and I do commend those people for actually seeking advice, because I think it's so important. But what I want you to think about is if you had 2 favorite restaurants. Okay, so Stace, give me your 2 favorite restaurants.
My kitchen and you want real ones?
Hey, whatever you think.
I don't know, Batoni's and McDonald's.
Okay, Batoni's and McDonald's. That's a great
choice. That's not necessarily true, but for the sake of this example.
There we go. Those are great examples for this, okay? So let's just imagine you get your favorite dishes at each of those restaurants. One's Italian and one's McDonald's.
And one's American.
All right? Now we're going to take a big bowl, and we're going to throw everything from those 2 restaurants into one bowl together, and we're going to mix it up. How's that going to taste?
That's going to be plumb nasty.
It is.
Big Mac lasagna.
Big Mac lasagna. Nope. And we often have Big Mac lasagnas for our retirement plan. That's what we do unintentionally.
Do people do that sort of as to get a second opinion because they are not trusting? Is that why they do that?
I think so. And an old rule of thumb was don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have this ingrained in us that's what that means is I have to go out there and get all these different pieces of advice. Otherwise, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. Well, what we say to that is, yes, you do need all those different pieces of advice. But if you're sick, do you go to a heart surgeon? If you're just sick, or do you go to your general doctor?
Yeah, I don't go to the heart surgeon with a broken arm.
That's right. Okay, so we do that. Unintentionally, we do that. We go to someone that's a specialist rather than our generic doctor to be able to help us out. And I think that's important. Now, I can't leave the show without saying we have a brain teaser for today.
Okay.
And it was something we mentioned earlier on the show. And whoever gets the answer to this, you can definitely email us, lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. So here's the brain teaser. What is the number 1 threat to your retirement? I tell you what, I am so excited about this show. I think we're going to have a great year. Lots of things. We've already got about 5 shows lined up. Special guests to join us. So really looking forward to it. And thank you, Stace, for all your input as well on the show.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services. If you have questions, you can email them to lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. Don't forget to learn how our sister company can assist you with all of your tax and consulting needs. You can find out more at briscoeandassociates.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more Life Planning 101. The opinions expressed herein are those of the firm and are subject to change without notice. The opinions referenced are as of the date of publication and are subject to change due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass. Any opinions, projections, or forward-looking statements expressed herein are solely those of the author, may differ from the views or opinions expressed by other areas of the firm, and are only for general informational purposes as of the date indicated. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Smart Money Group LLC. Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group LLC are separate entities and are not owned or controlled by Calton & Associates Incorporated.